Listen.
Good morning, everyone. It being 9 o'clock on Wednesday, April 10th, we'd like to bring the Kane County Human Services Committee to order. We could do a roll call, please. I believe we have Mr. Tarver and Mr. Linder online.
Allen, Kenyon, Lewis, Silva, Tarver,
Tarver's here.
Linder,
Linder here.
Pepe,
Pepe here.
Sturgis.
Surge is here.
You have an in-person quorum.
We have an in-person quorum. I believe we need to ask for a unanimous consent for remote attendance for Mr. Tarver and Mr. Linder. Ms. Silva, are we okay with that? Mr. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, Mr. Tepe? We are okay with that.
Just move on, make it so. Make it so, just make it so. Move on.
Ms. Lewis? Approval of minutes from the March 13th, 2024.
I move that we have a unanimous consent and approve them.
Thank you for doing that swiftly enough, Mr. Kenyon. You could have been criticized if you didn't do it any faster. Public comment. We see none. Blair, do you have any online? We just lost signal on one monitor. Thank you. Monthly financial reports are attached on file and should have been reviewed prior. Any comments to that? We can direct them to Kathy, please. Let's move on to the Department of Human Resource Management, Jamie Labrillo. Seems like we might want to expedite these and just let us know if there's anything out of tolerance.
Good morning. All of the reports are attached. Everything's within tolerance. Health insurance programs on target. The workers' comp liability programs are consistent. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
On the workers' comp, it seems like we've had a couple of claims coming through that were larger, that were discussed in executive session. When do those reserves pop on the reports that we can see? And are there so few of them that that doesn't impact anything? Or are we bracing for impact on something 2 months from now? Or
So when we have a work-related or liability accident occur, our claims adjusters work with us, and if it's in litigation, the state's attorney to set a reserve that is appropriate. So if you look at the expenses on there, those include our estimated expenses to actually resolve the claim. So in the case of a recent workers' comp claim that was very large that we expect to go into excess carrier, we have already included that in our reports at the maximum out of pocket for that one. So we do set those at the time of claim. So those cases that you're referring to that they settled for under reserves. So those amounts have already been accounted for in our reporting.
perfect. Thank you so very much. Appreciate that. With approval of the committee, I would like to just bring one item up from old business into this while Jamie's still at the podium regarding there was some conversation had in previous meetings discussing the notion of bringing on an additional loss control specialist. Can you just bring, and I'm sorry, I'm catching you off guard with this, but there's been lots of phone calls and conversations regarding the need for this, where the expense would come from. And while at committee, we made the comment, this is one of those things where you got to spend a buck to make a buck sort of deal, that the savings would come from within the fund itself.
Mm-hmm.
I've really lost track as to where we're at on that. Could you just refresh us or bring us up to speed?
Certainly. I did present on that last month, just for the committee's general consensus, whether or not to include it in next year's budget for the board's consideration. So what that looks like is that position would be paid for out of the insurance liability fund. It would not be a general fund position, so it would not impact the general fund. The insurance liability fund does have its own levy, and that fund pays out all of our insurance costs and our insurance claims. I do believe that a robust risk management program for this county would ultimately save more in claims costs than the position costs. But that was all presented. I certainly can present it again or present it at a different committee if you feel that the board, the greater board, has the desire to hear more about that.
I believe that based on the conversations or the comments or the inquisitions that came to me, we're just a little bit lost as to what we're trying to do with that in terms of a timeline. So were you looking to make a hire on a position that doesn't exist this year? Was that just a budget consideration for next year?
I was just looking for consensus whether or not to include it in our first draft of the 2025 budget. We are not looking to add a position at this time at all, but looking to plan for it in future.
In the budget presentation, there was a line item showing a multi-year history of departments. I went out of my way to congratulate this particular department, your department, for actually coming in $1,000 less over a 10-year period, keeping your budget at approximately $365,000. In adding this individual, would that add to that line item, or does that come out of a different contingency fund in those reports that Ms. Hopkinson was showing?
If Ms. Hopkinson's report was showing total salaries for the Human Resources Department, that would include a collection of all funds. Human Resources Department does have 3 funds. We have a health insurance fund, we have general fund, and we have insurance liability fund. So if that report, I don't know which report you're referring to. If it referred to total cost across all funds, then yes. If it was a general fund report showing human resources salaries coming from the general fund, then it would not, because this would not be a general fund position, but would be a special revenue fund position.
Got it. Then I guess what I'm asking for, or Jamie, if you could, reflect for me, did we give you consensus last month to move forward in giving this some shape, or did we not?
You did.
Okay. All right. And I think that was just maybe ambiguous in my mind. But based on the phone calls, I would rather revisit it and get it on public record, so that you have, in the instructions you need going forward.
We did include a draft job description in the materials that we provided. And so we will be putting that in our budget for budget consideration when it comes through.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions on that? Ms. Lewis?
Not a question or comment. So I'm 1,000% in favor of this, always have been. Seen great benefits in the private sector. But I did have one concern last month, and that's that we make sure that we make the sheriff's department especially aware of why we want to do this and the benefits, because most of the risk and a lot of the stuff comes from him. So I just want to make sure that we're properly communicating with him from the get-go and not, getting his dander up.
Jamie, have
Absolutely. We
you
want
had
to work.
any conversation with that department at all?
We
that
need
office?
to talk with them. We work with them regularly on insurance matters. We have a monthly call with them on insurance matters and things like that. So we do work closely with the sheriff's department on insurance and workers' comp and liability matters. Specifically about this position, no. As in terms of the desire for this position to work with all the elected offices, when that person develops the program, they will have to take into consideration working with the departments, and that will be a unique feature and someone that we look forward to take this over, is the ability to work cooperatively with our elected offices in addition to our county departments.
To Ms. Lewis's comment, could you open some dialogue on that and just get a general flavor whether that would be supported or not?
Certainly.
Who is your contact person at that office?
Usually the undersheriff in terms of things like this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And if we can help in any way, if I can help in any way, let me know.
Certainly.
Thank you so much. Compliance training reports?
That's the required mandatory sexual harassment prevention training. Now that we're a couple of years into this, people are getting on board with getting that done annually as they need to. So it's getting easier every year.
Does any member of the committee have any old business to discuss? New business, item A, resolution authorizing fiscal year 24 judiciary and court budget adjustments. Jamie, could you introduce that, please?
Certainly. Andrea O'Brien is here from the judiciary to answer any questions you have about it. Just in background, the judiciary was included in the equity study originally, but at the end they did not actually participate and go through with the raises that were recommended. They are now requesting to do some adjustments of their own. Those adjustments do come in under the amount we were intending to give them with the equity study, but it's distributed in a way that is different than the equity study did. One of the major expenses in this is they have attorneys that work within their office, and the board did give the attorneys in both the state's attorney's office and the public defender considerable adjustments, and they are trying to match that adjustment with the attorneys that work in their office. But I will turn it over to Andrea as she can probably give you more detail around that.
Thank you so much. Andrea, please come up. Is Kathy Hopkinson in the room with us? Do me a favor and give her a. Yep, thanks.
What was that?
Nudge saying she will have questions on this.
Good
That was
morning.
it. Yes. Thank you. Good
Yes,
morning.
thank you. Yeah, I'm here to give a little brief kind of explanation, as Jamie said. Under the equity study, we were found to be underfunded about $55,000. In reviewing the allocations of those funds, we determined that after seeing increases with public defender and state's attorneys, that really the way the increases were suggested would not be equitable with some of the other increases already given. So what we've done is we've asked for less than the amount in the equity study, but money to make our staff attorney positions and our paralegal position equitable, because we usually post at what the state's attorney and public defender does for their for their attorneys. And then in our request as well, we have several bailiffs. They're our lowest paid employees. We're asking for a 50-cent increase per hour for those individuals. Currently, they're paid, they're full-time, like all of our other employees, and they're under $30,000 a year.
Thank you. If I could, a couple of things, couple of comments, couple of questions. Jamie, if we're asking for, and Kathy, if we're asking for some funding for this, is that coming from we had set aside 700,000-ish for the first, don't go far, from the equity study to help with some of those low-level, low-hanging fruit lifts. Is this part of that, and is that where the funding is coming from for this?
Well, the funding for that also came from reserves. So while, yes, they are asking for less, they did not take the money in the equity study. They did not make the adjustments recommended by the equity study. So that money was not used. That was included in the budget coming out of reserves for the equity study. They did not use that.
Okay.
So this amount is under what was set aside for their office in the equity study. Does that answer your question?
My question, I guess my specific question is, in what year was that money budgeted? And is this request coming out of that money? And what I'm hearing you say is it was the old money and it did not come out at that time. So now this is a new ask.
It did not come out at that time, but that money was set aside for 2024 budget, if you mean. So when 2024 budget was done, money was planned to go towards equity adjustments. They did not use their portion of that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and that amount, and again, Kathy, you can feel free to come up. Yeah, and that amount was 7, 8, I mean, started at 6, wound up at 8. What, how many?
So the amount of money that was budgeted in the 2024 budget for equity studies did not include this.
Okay,
That's why this is coming to the committee.
okay. And if I may, thank you for being succinct with that. If, ma'am, your name again? Okay, and Andrea, this is one of those gray areas, and I mean no disrespect in any way, shape, or form, but I'm struggling with the notion of we didn't want to participate in your study, but now we're asking for more money. I'm really struggling with that. I'm truly to my core saying, we asked you, you said, I don't want to play in your sandbox, but now we're asking you to ignore our actions and give us something. And I'm really struggling with that. And I'm trying to be as polite as could be.
I appreciate that, but I would need to draw to your attention that the public defender decided not to participate as well. So did the state's attorney's office, and you granted them the increases.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. I can disagree and still be fair. And in my second comment on this is, 50 cents for the bailiffs. I'm confused on this.
Okay.
These guys make pennies, and I'm talking $26,000, $27,000 a year. Now, I'm confused on this, and Deb and Mike, I will ask you from a historic perspective, and Mr. Shepro, if you're here as well. I get confused because I'm told that some of these bailiffs were originally sheriffs, and now because of IMRF, they're working part-time or something, and so they couldn't make more than a certain amount, and that's why they've made so little. But now all of a sudden, we're saying, no, that's not true anymore. Am I just totally mistaken on that?
So bailiffs have always been provided in the courtrooms. They are not court security. Some of them are retired police officers and sheriff staff that have transitioned and moved into the bailiff position. But no, it's not correct in the fact that we have a few seasonal bailiffs that are restricted by the income they receive because they collect IMRF.
Okay,
So those are seasonal. Those are not our full-time employees.
so a different bucket of,
Correct.
got it, perfect.
Our full-time employees are a regular Kane County employee like everyone else. They are, they don't have arrest powers. They don't carry weapons. They are citizen staff. So most of them currently are not trained in law enforcement. They are retired from other positions, and they've come to work for us full-time at the low rate of under 30,000. So we're trying to raise their salary just because for some time, it's been difficult to staff those positions. The judges find them very helpful. They're in most of our courtrooms. And so we're trying to get them up to an hourly wage that's fair and reasonable. So
Would-
they are
would you,
not.
in your opinion,
courts.
and I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you off, but in your opinion, are these primary breadwinners? Are these retirees and second jobs? Are these, describe your typical bailiff.
Most of them are retirees. They've had a career in another, field. They come from various sectors, retail, private business. They have retired or chose to kind of get out of the rat race and have kind of a slower pace position, but it's full-time, it's every day. And so that's kind of our demographic
Okay,
for most of our bailiffs, but not all. Some, it is a full-time regular job.
and you understand where I'm just trying to,
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to get a feel based on past information, which may
Sure.
have been misinformation, but trying to figure. Dr. Silva.
Respectfully, my opinion is that it doesn't really matter.
I
We're
was about to weigh in on that and say that perhaps you shouldn't go there.
Well, the IMRF issue is where I was going, and that does matter.
Okay,
Because if we're trying to do this, but there's a unintended consequence, that's what I'm trying to avoid. If
I
I
think the
didn't
concern-
articulate that, please let me do so.
the concern is with deciding whether someone is a primary breadwinner as a potential criteria.
Let me rephrase from primary breadwinner to this is their beginning of their career cycle versus I have retired from a previous position and I'm on an IMRF, which has a maximum amount.
Right, and that is, yeah, our full-time employees are not, I mean, they contribute to IMRF as a county employee, but they are not restricted.
Restricted,
by-
I think is the word
That's
that
correct.
we're,
They are
Got
not
it.
restricted by IMRF. All of our full-time employees and our part-time are not.
got it. Then I think that's where I was going to try and
Understood.
figure that out. So does that clarify for
Helps.
you?
Yes.
And if
that
I was
helps.
shaping that in the wrong way, Ken, thank you for helping me get to the thrust of that, but yes, Mr. Tepe.
Mr. Chair, I have three questions, okay? One, is this going to be on the judicial agenda?
Yes, it
also?
is. We're presenting it tomorrow as well.
Okay, second, where is this going to be funded? It says to be determined. If it's not already going on, it looks like it's going to have to be funded out of reserves. Is that
That's
right?
correct. That's correct. I believe, like you
See
said,
Kathy's shaking her head. Okay. And I see the amount is 59,000. Is that for half a year? Are you actually saying that next year it's going to be 120,000?
no, we are not. It is
Oh.
for, so the increase is just to get them up to the salary level that the PD and public defender are for this year. And then obviously we would have to include that in our budget for next year for the full
Right,
amount.
so for next year, it's going to be more like 120,000 because it's roughly for half a year.
It would not be that high because we're already paying the salaries for these employees already. It's the increase. So the increase will not be that large.
I'm Mr. Tepe, I think I'm following you. If
So-
you're asking for $55,000 more, is that a prorated amount or an annual amount?
So that is an annual amount. So actually it would be no more than what we would get next year.
Ah,
Just, it's not double what we're asking for next year. That's not the case.
so you're really not asking for that amount this year?
So I mean, we've talked with finance and I know we need to rework the numbers because there's some FICA and there's some IMRF in there. But to prorate it, it would probably come out to about the same because those are not included. They're included on the form, but not in the resolution. So there's some numbers that we have to tweak to get it to finance. But it would not be, it would probably be comparable because the IMRF and the FICA are not in there. And actually we would have to reduce the amounts because it's not prorated, it's for a full year.
Yeah, I'm personally in favor of this. I just want to understand it.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Tepe too, and Ms. Lewis, I'll come to you. Mr. Tepe, I'm in agreement with you. Conceptually, I'm in favor of this. However, yeah, I find it difficult to swallow that in an equity study, we have attorneys and here's a base level attorney. This is what we pay in Kane County, but if you're in this department, we pay less for that attorney than what we pay in that department. I thought that was the entire purpose of the equity study, so that everybody's at a base. If I'm an attorney grade 1 or I'm an attorney grade 4 or I'm a lead attorney, yeah, Jamie, am I mistaken on that was the goal?
That was the goal, but then the board did approve raises for the state's attorney and public defender outside of the equity study. This department is the only one remaining with attorney staff. So in that regard, it would be more equitable to give them that same amount so that they're paid consistently with the attorneys in the other departments. That was outside of the equity study. Just to be clear what the results of the equity study were regarding this department, regarding the bailiffs was actually more than 50 cents. So the bulk of the 55,000 that was predicted in the equity study for the judiciary was for the bailiffs because they have quite a few bailiffs, was actually for the bailiffs, increasing those salaries. So the attorneys, the amount given to the attorneys, that was a lower amount in the equity study simply because the money had not been given to the state's attorney or the public defender at the time the equity study was done. So that used the lower salary amount that was in the equity study. So to compare to the attorneys. So that was all the attorneys in all of those departments at a lower salary, but then a much higher salary was later approved for those attorneys by the board. So that was not accounted for in the equity study. So they're really using some of that money that was intended in the equity study for the bailiffs to give towards those attorneys to get them.
Ms.
equitable.
Lewis has a question, but before we go there, why didn't we include these attorneys at the time we did those attorneys?
Ask.
Is it that simple? They just didn't ask? Really?
Yes, essentially, the public defender and the state's attorney came to the board with a resolution asking to have the salaries increased
Okay. Ms. Lewis?
independently.
So I'm sorry, but I'm a bit confused. So the bailiff, okay, we did our equity study, and even though they did not participate, we deemed in our equity study that they should be getting more.
Yes,
And then when it comes to these particular attorneys, we in our equity study said they should be getting less.
that is because it was before. So the equity study was compared to other county employees, and the other attorneys within the county were paid less at the time the equity study was done. You have since raised those salaries, so that would raise
Okay,
what would be equitable for these staff.
okay. So really our equity study should be readjusted to account for the salaries that we actually,
Yes, but since the judiciary is no longer participating, we don't have any other attorneys in the county
okay.
to compare them to.
But I think we should give the bailiff and get them up to what our equity study said. I mean, that wouldn't make sense to me because, and it's just my own personal feeling, but this committee and especially you put in a lot of, I mean, over a year's work to try to make this equity study good. And it seems every time we turn around, somebody wants to go outside the equity study. And if we deem a bailiff should make X amount of money, we should give it to them, is what I think.
I agree. Ultimately, I don't believe what they're currently being paid is a livable wage in today's market, regardless of their, current situation, their location within their career that they happen to be. They are full-time county employees. So ultimately, their demographic is not relevant to that.
Agree with that totally.
Mr. Linder?
Thank you. I just, this is a little off course, but as we move forward and start talking about an external equity study, people have to either be in or out. I can't, I really I'm having a problem with this idea of people don't want to participate in the study, but then they want some of the fruits from the tree anyway. And I'm not, that's not a personal attack on anybody. It's something that we've allowed, but I'm concerned about that. Otherwise, we're wasting our time and money doing these equity studies.
Mike, I concur 100%. It's to say this is the study and this is the results, but then as a board, we circumvent our own study, give the increases, totally negate what the study said, and now have somebody else, have another department or office come in and say, yeah, but you did it for them, you should do it for, what was the point of doing the study if we're not even going to follow our own results? So thank you for the comment. Dr. Silva.
Thank you. I mean, maybe the other way to look at it is that we're, as a board, doing something wrong, that we're going in a direction that is not effective for all of our staff, because to me, it's kind of apples and oranges. I do understand the umbrella of the equity study. However, we still have a real life issue that folks that are working for us are making under $30,000. I can't fathom living under $30,000. So whether they participate in the study or not, we're still dealing with people's livelihoods, their everyday ability to sustain themselves. And that to me is bigger than an equity study or anything that we can put on paper. So while I agree, there needs to be some sort of movement in the direction of understanding our departments. And we do that because we don't know what you do day to day. We need to have something that guides us in the direction of an idea of what you do day to day. But I do feel it is important, regardless of where we're at, that if we can inch 50 cents towards allowing somebody to make just a little bit more money, I am in favor of that. And how we're going to pay for that is a bigger discussion, and we are having that right now. But I think it is different from the everyday can I buy groceries? Can I put gas in my car? At the expenses that are going up and my salary is staying the same. For our staff, I feel we need to look at it under a different lens. And I know it's unconventional because I do agree with what you're saying.
If I can,
Yes, sir.
I think I think we have two different buckets here because, what I'm hearing is this was driven by the notion of our attorneys make different than your attorneys, where you and I might be looking at this saying, but this was about bailiffs. This was about the lowest hanging fruit that our study clearly identified. And Jamie, do you have any idea, or Kathy maybe? I don't think the study said 50 cents an hour. I think the study was a much larger for these bailiffs.
It was almost, I would say the vast majority of the 55,000 that was intended for the judiciary was to increase the bailiff salary. It was not a flat 50 cent. It was depended on years of service, how they were graded by their department head in terms of their the salary range penetration score that determined what percentage they are through the range. So it was a lot more detailed than a flat dollar amount. And it was the majority, but not all of the 55,000. But again, at the time it was conducted and the attorney's salaries were set by that was prior to the board increasing the comparable salary for those attorneys. So if we were to reevaluate a comparable salary within the county for those attorneys, it would be different now because those salaries have changed.
So back to the question, what did the original study indicate for the bailiffs?
I don't have the exact dollar amount, but it was,
Shoot from the
I
hip.
believe it was 31-ish thousand. Does that sound right, Andrea? I believe it was around 31,000 a year.
If you had
as a
to,
base.
Vern, if you had to divide that out by 40 hours a week, is that 50 cents an hour? Or
5 hours a week.
35 hours a week? Where would that put us?
It was a different amount for each person, depending on a number of other factors, including their seniority and their
He said
merit
50
level.
cents an hour is $20 weeks.
Why don't we just ask Andrea to go back and try to recalculate if we paid these people the minimum to our equity study, what that would look like.
Okay, and I was saying, because under the equity study, every bailiff was not scored or provided the same increase. Here, we're asking to have it a standard increase for all of them because their duties and job responsibilities are the same. The equity study broke out individuals, as Jamie stated, for longevity, years of service, that kind of thing. This is not taking that into account. So we're viewing it a little bit differently. In judiciary, we have treated our bailiffs the same because every job duty for them is the same with slight variance depending on what courtroom you're in. So, I mean, I can break out and supply what Jamie provided in the equity study, but it would not be the same across the board for all bailiffs.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Shepro.
This may be irrelevant, but I know that at one time, different counties tended to treat the bailiffs in not all the same way because state statute says that the county board sets the number of deputy sheriffs. And in some counties, they were deputy sheriffs, but then the sheriff said, I don't want to have to be limited. So they got classified differently. And I think that our union contract, whether that affects anything here, I'm not sure, but it's another example of where they were treated the way that you might think at first blush they would be treated.
Just muddy that water even.
These are not union employees. They are county staff, like the rest of judiciary, who are non-union, and they are not deputies, or they do not fall under the sheriff or court security.
Yeah, they've never, as I
Right,
understand it,
never
they've never
have,
been
so.
deputies in King
A little
County.
different treatment.
So at this minute in time, is there a motion authorizing fiscal year 24 judiciary and court budget adjustments.
Silva moves.
Is there a second?
Linder
Alan.
seconds.
Who was that?
Linder.
Linder seconds. Deb beat you to it. Okay. Any additional conversation needed on that? All right, please call the roll.
Allen.
Aye.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Lewis.
Lewis, yes.
Silva.
Silva, yes.
Tarver. Mr. Tarver. Linder.
Linder, yes.
Surges.
Surges, yes, but I am asking for some additional information before this makes it to finance. I will have additional questions with numbers on that, so.
It
Is the
passes.
committee flow then judicial and then finance?
So judicial is next and then finance, just to make sure.
Yes, it is already on the agenda for JPS tomorrow.
Okay. You all set with that? Perfect, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
This is just an additional question. I thought we
You missed it.
had planned on 3 years of catch-up money at the $700,000 or $800,000 level. Did that not pan out?
I will, let me answer and then I'll let Jamie give you the real answer.
Okay.
My understanding was, yes, we were going to take a bucket of money and divide it into a 3-year program to get those raises. And I believe the first tranche of money was the 700,000 to 800,000, but I don't believe that this board has funded the second tranche yet. Am I even close, Jamie?
Actually, once the elected offices no longer participated, we were able to do the full amount of the study for, I think it was around 900,000 in the end, was it 1.8 by the end? So we did it all in the first year. There are no more additional years to reach the internal equity for the county departments. It was all determined to be done in the first year.
Does that answer, you look confused. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Offices decided not to participate. We used the money for the departments to get their internal equity up. And we move forward. Is that
Correct.
a concise statement?
Yes.
Dynamite. Wow, look at the flow of this agenda. New business item B, external equity, discussion only. Don't even know how to begin a discussion until, as Dr. Silva mentioned, we have a much larger discussion regarding funding. And I don't know how you even begin this dialogue without knowing where the money's coming from. Because as Mr. Tepe just so eloquently pointed out, we're taking this money out of reserve to even fund the internal. I don't know that this is the appropriate time to have this conversation, but I am just one man and I would leave it to the committee.
That in and of itself is an answer to my question. Essentially, I get a lot of questions coming from departments and staff asking if we're doing external equity as planned. And the, offline feeling I have gotten from various board members is, given the current financial situation, that the board needs to pause, determine its funding sources, and see what they can do. But I wanted some kind of official direction from this committee, whether you want that pursued or not. Ultimately, it's a board decision on whether we do it or not and when we do it. And so that is the impression I'm getting from everyone. I think external equity is important. It's what everyone wants. I think it's what the board wants. It's what the department heads want. However, funding is something for the board to decide when that is the right time and give us direction on when to do that. It's very important that you not do it until you're ready to fund it. To do the study and to invest in the study and then not implement it, I think would do more harm than good. So I think the board needs to be prepared to fund it when they conduct it, similar to what we did with internal equity. So that's 100% a decision for this committee to direct us on whether or not we should begin that next step.
Jamie, would it be appropriate to say that we are not interested in doing this study internally, that we would be turning this to an outside vendor to put it together?
That has been the intention all along.
Okay, so at this time, we're just gonna bring this around the horn. Mr. Linder?
Yeah, I'm there. Two things. One is we keep pecking at reserves and keep talking about all the places where to use these excess reserves. And every time you turn around, today we spent some reserves to help these attorneys. They should be helped. I get that, but we don't have the money to do the external equity thing. And Jamie's absolutely right to do the study and then turn around and tell people, well, okay, you should be making $4,000 a year more, but we don't have it. It isn't going to help anybody. And I also think we're going to have some sort of discussion going at that as to what the status is of departments or offices who opt out. We need to have that discussion up front. We can't come around after the fact and say, okay, we weren't in the study, but we want some money out of reserves. We can't do that. So two places. I'm agree with Jamie. We can't even approach it until we have an idea how to fund it. But then when we do approach it, we have to have some ground rules.
Thank you so much, Ms. Allen. She's looking for direction for her staff. Do we move forward or do we hold?
Well, I don't think that our goal here was to be punitive. So I think it's okay to say, look, we took a first stab at this and we needed as much cooperation as we could get. And we understand that some departments were concerned that we might be intrusive, but having seen how it worked and having seen that there were employees who needed to be buoyed up and we chose to do that like we did today. That's how we're going forward, but there are going to be penalties in the future. You have to pay to play, or you have to play if you hope to get paid. So we're trying to be generous, but we need your help and we're asking nicely and we expect you to respond favorably. I would just like to know how much an outside consultant would cost to do.
Great question.
If we could get a range. And I'd also like to know if we can borrow from anybody else. The Forest Preserve, we know, has gone through this drill, though it's very different. But even though DuPage has the money to pay much more, have they gone through this? Are there comps that we can borrow from? McHenry, maybe? Surely we're not the only ones going through this.
All of the other counties have done this recently. So that they do have these systems. They were borrowed in the methodology when we did our internal study. The part of external equity, it's difficult to ballpark what a vendor would say, but I would expect that to be approximately $100,000 for the market research. So that external vendor would do the market research. They would use primarily other counties as their comparisons in that, as well as other municipalities. We don't really compare to private sector. And so we don't use private sector as a comparison when we do a study. And I believe a vendor would also follow that same process as they have. I've reviewed the studies that have come out of some of the other counties in terms of what they've used as comparables. They always have a list of what they've used as comparables. The position titles are not an exact match. Even when you look at counties, you're lucky to get 20% of position titles that match. So in some cases, for example, like a bailiff, it's easy to make a comparison, but in most of your anything beyond the front line, it's not a direct comparison. So someone does need to evaluate, which would be the purpose of that vendor. So it is a considerable amount of work. So I would expect a vendor it would be in an area that we would have to RFP the service.
Okay, we're pushing a quarter till, so I want to try and move this around a little bit. Deb, are you saying that that's a yes, move forward with the study or with shaping that, or no, hold right now?
No, I need more data. So no.
Mr. Kenyon, sorry.
Okay.
Move forward or hold?
Oh, if you don't have the money, what are you doing a study?
Miss Lewis?
We'll give an IOU.
Yep. Miss Lewis?
So even though I respect Mike Kenyon over there, quiet. And you had your say now, quiet. No. Order, yes, more order. Don't make me come over there. I am respectfully in opposition of what my two colleagues over there said. I think it's extremely important that we do the equity study. And I don't see why doing an equity study says we have to give everybody the money. We sit here month after month, and especially when budget time, and we hear that we are losing people right and left because we don't pay them enough. So I would personally I love data. I'd like to see what aren't we paying them? How much are we off? What are we losing? And when we do an equity study, does that include like salary, benefits, and like our area? Because we know some areas are cheaper. Like I think you can probably live cheaper in Kane County than you could in DuPage. I mean, what all goes into an equity study?
The vendor does typically make adjustments for location and things like that in determining what would be an equitable salary. It's a very in-depth process where it does go into detail in terms of cost of living in your area, salary, benefits, and everything total.
Yeah, I'm in favor of seeing it. And I don't think that necessarily means we have to go back and raise everybody's salary.
Okay.
We're just doing it against external.
Miss
We're not
Lewis, thank
looking
you.
at Existing employees.
I do want to make one comment. I find it, let me just ask the question. Jamie, does the data indicate when we hear statements that we are continuing to lose employee because of wages? That would not be my interpretation of the data.
It happens sometimes. It's not every time we lose an employee is not from salary. There are a number of reasons people stay at their job versus leaving. The primary reason people stay at their job is coworkers. I mean, if you look at the data research, not specifically ours, just general research, we continue to do exit interviews and we see a number of reasons people leave. In some cases, salary is the reason. In some cases, it is not. It really is dependent on the situation. People looking for another job typically go looking for another job for a reason other than salary. And then that's when they find out that they can make a higher salary elsewhere and decide to leave. So usually people are looking for a job for a reason other than salary. And then salary is something they see when they go out looking.
Thank you. Dr. Silva, move it forward or hold?
I don't know.
Fair enough. Mr.
Don't know.
Tarver, move forward or hold?
Wow, there's a lot of information here. I would lean towards moving forward.
Mr. Tepe,
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you for letting me chime in on this.
you're on the list.
I'm ex officio, but thank you.
No, you're not.
I actually think we need to give direction to the staff more effectively on what they should plan on for next year's budget. Right now, the only major direction they've been given is from Ms. Hopkins, from Kathy Hopkinson, which is limit your budget to 3% increase. And all of that extra is going to have to come out of reserves. So if the staff is going to have objectives and a 3% budget increase limit, then I think the board should make that decision definitively going forward. That's what the department should be looking at for this year. In regard to the equity study, I think Ms. Labrillo did a phenomenal job with that a year or so ago. And I think we should enact her findings from back then rather than going and hiring some other firm and paying them, because she did such an excellent job. So,
You know what?
thanks for letting me chime in.
No, Vern, I appreciate that. And if I can, and Mr. Shepro, please feel free to pipe up here. Jamie, my feelings on this is that somehow during that equity study, it became a bloodbath. And somehow you and your department became villainized in this situation. And part of going out to an outside vendor is to say, we don't want that situation to occur again. Am I mischaracterizing that? And if so, I apologize and will retract it. But
I think that is the general consensus that an outside vendor would be preferred by some of the board and staff that chimed in an opinion. And I don't object to that if that's something that they prefer.
thank you. I am a no at this time. So Mr. Shepro, I am very confused because I have Mr. Linder is a no, Miss Allen is a no, Mr. Kenyon is a no, Miss Lewis is a yes, Mr. Tarver is a yes. I am a no,
So
and there's an exit, just no to move this, looking for consensus to tell her, start trying to find a vendor, put an RFP out, spend the $100,000,
By
figure
any
out what
def-
this is
by
going to
any-
cost us.
By any dictionary definition of consensus, I don't think you have one.
Okay,
may help.
Silva?
I may help with that. It was important for me to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you for sharing that. So, I am a yes.
You are a yes. Again, I don't hear clear consensus on this right now. I'm sorry, Ms. Gums.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, do you
Hi.
mind if I speak? I'm
Did you
not
have a
on.
hand up? Yes.
I did. I thank you for allowing me to speak. I just have a couple of opinions on this, as always. I find it very challenging to do a budget if you don't know what your mortgage is going to be. So I think the external study is essential. I think you have to predict what's going to happen before you can budget what is happening. We've been talking about this since I've been here. How do you let your employees know that you're doing something to address the inequity that they are currently being paid? If you do nothing, you're telling them we're doing nothing. If you hire this company, which I believe it should be an external company that does it, then at least, even if we don't get there, we're telling them we are trying to fix it. Until you do that, they're just sitting back going, well, they don't care about us. There's 1,300 people that are thinking that right now. So my perspective is it needs to be done. And yeah, it's going to suck because it's going to say you guys pay crap to your employees. And we're going to have to look at that. And then we're going to say to the people that come and speak to us, this is why we need to do this, this, and this. If you don't have that data, if you don't have that baseline, then how do you even argue that going forward? So I don't want to change anybody's mind, but I'm trying to change your mind because I think that there's a bigger picture there. You can't finish the painting until you have all the paint. I mean, how do you even talk about a budget if you don't know what it's going to be next year?
Thank you. And again, not to be confrontational, but I will challenge that I could find a whole bandwidth of employees that aren't paid crap, that are paid quite well and are at the high end of the scale. And the general characterization that we don't pay well is not accurate. There are some that are not external equity, but there are plenty that are and that are at the high end of the scale. And so I am just putting out there that when we say we're losing all these people because of this, or we don't pay, no, that's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy and putting information out that isn't accurate. The data does not support that. Now, is there an exception? Surely there is. But by and large, the broad brush is not that we pay like crap. We might find some entry-level positions in some offices or some departments. We might find a senior analyst here or there, but we can equally say, here's a whole boatload of people that are paid well above.
So it
You know,
sounds to me like you're changing your vote to yes, we should have the study.
oh, no, my vote is absolutely no. And until Ms. Hopkinson says this is where the money's coming from to fund, because I don't believe this is going to be 100,000. I think when we put this RFP out, this is going to come in at about 160 grand. And unless this board says we'd be willing to fund that at 160,000, out of reserves to go do this. So I would be more than happy to take this as I serve on finance under Mr. Berman. I would be more than happy to bring this to finance And if finance says, yes, we support that money to move forward, I'd be happy to bring it back here and say, Ms. Labrillo, let's start working on an RFP. But until it's funded, I don't know where we're pulling, 160 grand out of,
Why don't we do the RFP and then find out what the funding is going to be? 100, 160.
because they only have a finite amount of time in their office. And I don't want them to do that unless we actually tell them we're going to fund it.
Would you like a resolution brought forward to finance for, not to exceed amount? To see if the board wants to approve the study?
I think that's.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that
do
would be appropriate.
My
mean,
only
yes.
caveat, Linda here, my only caveat is that we need to, in our discussions, we need to be saying, this is to measure what the gap is. This is not to say that at the end of the study, we have a bucket of money to throw at people.
Great point. Thank you, Mike.
That's a good point.
And also,
Appreciate it.
one last thing. We're not going to have these results for this next budget round, I don't believe.
Jamie, what do you think let's say tomorrow we said, here's a bucket of money.
Let's say at finance the end of the month.
Is this
That's the next
18 months worth of study? What are you thinking?
I think it's 6 months at least.
Okay,
Depending on
6.
the availability of the vendor. That's when we RFP'd this before. That was the estimate they gave us just for the external market study. Was 6 months, but that's based on their availability. So if we have a vendor that's available to start immediately versus one that's booked and has to start us later, that does happen as well.
Means we
Anita,
get-
that's a great question.
That means we'd get those results for the next budget cycle, the very beginning of them. It sounds like.
That's a
when we
great
get
question.
them.
I didn't even consider that.
That's why I'm here for you, buddy.
Time frame. Thank you. Miss Juby, did you have a hand up?
No, I didn't, but I.
That's okay then, because we have lots of stuff to do. We have to move on to.
I weigh in then?
Sure.
Because you can me, thank you, because I'm not on this committee, but I agree that without any data, we're just talking in the wind. We don't know what it's gonna cost. We don't know how many employees it is. And while I agree with Michelle a lot of the time, this study isn't just gonna show us who's not paid well. It's going to show us maybe we're top heavy in some other studies. So to both of you, we won't know what it shows. We need the data. It's not going to hurt us to go out for an RFP. If anything, then we have more data to say, hey, it's going to be a 6-month lead time before they can even come in. Or we're going to get, yeah, we can take you on at the end of the month and blah, 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 blah. But we need more data. And we've just spent a whole ton of time trying to make a decision off of zero data.
If I was in the audience, I would applaud her.
Interesting. Thank you. Not really sure where that went, but we spent in this, you're talking about millions of dollars. So this is the genesis of a conversation.
Data.
That this is the genesis of a conversation that, to Mr. Linder's end, kind of gives us some directive as to what the goal of the data is. And that conversation is not frivolous. That conversation is important.
No, it is important,
So-
but it needs to go forward to the RFP process.
Okay, thank you.
So we're bringing.
Deb, this is it though. Because we're pushing 10 o'clock.
Okay,
Till 10:30.
shut me down if this is inappropriate. But I want to know, I would like to know the other considerations that go in there. For instance, there are certain careers here that are stepping stones. So if a state's attorney or a public defender has people going in and out, it's not because we're a bad county. It's not because we don't pay enough. It's because that is a very usual career path in that particular profession. Do we take into consideration that we're a good match because there are people who have families here who have a certain amount of time they want to spend with those families?
Jamie, is that to where Deb is going? Is that in an external equity study? Would that be a parameter? I'm just curious.
It's not really a parameter so much as that's why we use other governmental entities as our comparison. For example, our attorneys will never make what a private attorney can make working in as an attorney, as a private attorney. It's not the same job by any means. They're completely different jobs. And so we do not typically use the same goes, for example, an IT professional. An IT professional for a private company is very different than what we do here. And that is not typically used as a comparison. So we usually exclusively use government entities in our external comparisons for that reason. And that is something that we would be able to set with our vendor. We would agree upon what agencies make a suitable comparison that they would use.
Certainly don't know enough about this, but is it the Juvenile Justice Center that has high turnover, not because of what we pay, just by the very essence of burnout? This is a tough job. And how do you equate that in? I'm certainly not qualified enough to say that, but I certainly understand what you're saying, and I appreciate everybody's input this morning. This is, you're looking for consensus. I'm hopefully that's taking some shape for you. Funding is, my number one thing here that, as I look at Kathy, but what I'm hearing from the rest of the body is you don't even know what your funding requirements are going to be in 3 to 5 years without having some baseline study to put in place. And if the going rate for that is $100,000 and 6 to 18 months, I'm embellishing on the 18 months, but 6 months plus, because by the time we get our ducks in a row on it, it'll be another 4 months. So, do you have what you think you need?
We will do some base research. I will reach out to Lake and McHenry, see what they paid for theirs. Compared to the first time we did it when we had no grade and range system and we were asking them to please do an external market study on 600 jobs and they wanted $500,000. Now we have a grade and range system, so they would pick 20 or 30 positions within varying grades to do their external study. And that's what I'm basing that on. That's how the other counties do it. They have grade and range systems and they take representative positions throughout to make those comparisons. So I will reach out. I will find out what they paid for theirs, if they will share that information with me, and then use that to bring forward a resolution to finance later this month with a not to exceed amount to see if it is in the board's.
Does anybody
wishes
have
to
it?
do that.
Could we bring that back here to kind of look at the methodology of that before we go to finance? Or does anybody is this a rush to get it to finance? Don't all talk at once. Okay.
I think we ought to have it a little
Finance.
bit more together than we go to finance, but
I think it should come here and put it more together before it goes to finance, but I'm Kathy, do you have any input in any of this? You're sitting there shaking your head and scowl on your face.
The only thing I'll follow up what Jamie said. The HR department here has done extensive work so far, putting the whole grade and rating system together, collecting all the job descriptions, getting departments to upgrade their job descriptions all across the county. That should be a money saver when you hire an external firm, because we've done so much work, they can take that work. So I'll add that. As far as the committee, that's up to you.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Anita, are you saying,
Consensus.
let's not go round and round horn. You want to come back here
No.
or do you want to go to finance?
Because it'll have to go to finance, then it'll have to go to exec, and then it'll have to go full board anyway, so
Dr.
everybody will
Silva,
have to
what-
weigh in.
I'm with you on this one to come back to the committee.
Deb?
Here.
Mike?
You could ask the finance chairman what he thinks.
yeah,
Just
I
raising
kinda
his
like,
hand.
I'm really trying not to be honest with you.
She's
I
raising
don't
his
want to
hand.
look stupid when we go to finance. I think
Yeah, we
need to
just-
have our stuff lined
Dale,
up.
there's so much more that goes into it. I'm just hoping we could shape it one more time. It's going to be a year. I mean, let's just do this right.
I think HR has done a fantastic job in the last, I really do. We've come a long way from what we didn't have. And I think that to improve that, may be the smartest thing to go outside to get somebody else to finish it off. But they've done an outstanding job.
Thank you for that. Please
really
tell her
have.
and her
They
team,
really have.
because they are beat up and bruised a little bit.
And I think that to complete that, this may be the next step. It's not going to be the most expensive study, I don't think,
Yeah.
because of the work that's already been done.
Jamie, let's bring it back here with some methodologies and what you're going to try and bake into this and get this approved, then we'll move it upstream. Is that clear enough direction for what you were looking for?
Yes, it is. I will have more detail for you at the next Human Services Committee.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Item C, resolution adopting a sick leave donation policy to the Personnel Policy Handbook. Let's go for let's, Deb, are you motioning that? And Monica, are you, Silva seconds? Okay, let's, do we have dialogue on this? Does everybody understand what this is?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and call the vote, please.
Allen,
Alan, I.
Kenyon, Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Tarver,
Carver, yes.
Linder,
Yes.
Sturgis.
Surges is no on this. Resolution D, establishing a transfer of American Rescue Plan Act grant staff management and functions from the Kane County Board Office to the Finance Department. I offer this, and if Mr. Sanchez is online, I believe Mr. Sanchez will be in support of this. And if Ms. Hopkinson is here, I think I can say that Ms. Hopkinson is in support of this. And I would ask for somebody to, I have motioned this, if somebody else will second.
Second, Linder.
Linder seconds. Any
Carver moves.
conversation on this at all?
I'm sorry.
Ms. Lewis?
I just want to know why it came to this committee.
It's a structure change. So just this doesn't impact the American Rescue Plan Committee. This is about the management of the staff. You know, everything has a department head. And so just getting it in the right department is all this is.
Got it.
Won't impact the committee at all.
And Anita, just to be fair, I asked that same question
Okay.
driving on my way in to Jamie and said, I read it last night and why is it here again? And she said, it's a structural, not a financial. And I said, that's fine. Please call the roll.
Allen,
Alan, I.
Kenyon, Lewis,
Lewis, yes.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Tarver,
Carver, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Sturgis.
Surges, yes. And Mr. Sanchez, again, you are a gentleman. Thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you for agreeing to this. And Ms. Hopkinson, we wish you well with this. Thank you so much. Reports, motion to be placed on file. Mr. Kenyon?
Yes.
All in favor? Perfect. Executive session, no need. Mr.
No.
Kenyon,
Nope.
I'm sorry.
Nope. New business. Here, can I do it? Can I throw
Sorry.
something else in?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Okay. Well, it was further back. There was some discussion and this is serious. There was some discussion about having a dog, what do you call it? Yes, an emotional service dog that belongs to the board in this building. And I'd just like to have the very brief opening conversation about how this board would feel about having that.
This is catching me a bit off guard, but what I
That's
can
what
tell you is this. I am involved in this program through Lutheran Services.
Mhm.
And the dogs cost about $16,000. And there is a huge problem right now. And I understand that Blair has a connection there. There is a huge problem because I want to voice this with the retrievers, the golden retrievers. Their lifespan because of the breeding has been shortened to about a 10-year period. And the Lutheran Services Organization has maybe hundreds of these dogs. We just lost ours at 9 years old. There is, if you do the research online, it is just terrible. And I know this is not the forum to get on a soapbox, but to bring it up, wow, with the amount of technology that we have, for this to be happening to this breed of dog is just incredible. I am a shelter dog sort of guy, not a
Me too.
bred sort of guy. So I don't think, does anybody have any problem with researching this a bit and having a shelter dog?
Yeah, well, shelter dogs are great.
I mean, I'm sorry, a support dog. I didn't mean to say shelter dog. I meant to say a support dog.
Some.
And I'm sure there's a budget amount that goes with that. I invite you to bring that to Mr. Berman's committee for finance, for funding, and see what that actually might cost. And then I would ask Ms. Labrillo to put assign this to Christine and put some shape on this to say, does the dog go home with whom? Who watches it at night? Should it,
We already decided.
if the dog bites somebody, how does that work? Do the background stuff so that the unintended consequence is not, what we want it to be. Anita, what a great,
And
great
we do
idea.
already have some in the county. We have Forest over at.
Okay, how
and the-
wonderful.
And the jail has one. And so, I mean, there are several.
And Anita, if I can, just for what it's worth, and if this is inappropriate, I'll apologize up front. Mr. Tarver, I see your hand. I did notice on the social media that there is an event coming up for the Pratt anniversary.
No, you missed the event.
What,
We're having a
already?
picnic. Yeah, we're having a picnic kind of thing.
Okay, and just know that our continued thoughts and prayers and for everybody, for you and everybody that was involved. I understand. I don't want to
Thank you.
let that slip by without a comment.
you're good.
Mr. Tarver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe I missed this, and I'm very familiar with the dogs, but what would be the support? Who would benefit from having one if that was the case?
Short of Miss Juby, Miss Lewis, Miss Combs, with their hands raised high, I don't know how to answer that. So
Dispatch.
All right,
let us have Human Services put some shape on that.
It's a very beginning discussion.
May I interrupt?
thank you.
And,
Check the messages on Zoom. Brett at Animal Control says you could bring a dog over now.
There we go. There we go. And Blair, let's not, we'll wrap this up, but Blair, what you do in training these dogs, to go back into the community, it takes a special person to do that, and you are unique, and we appreciate everything that you do. Thank you.
Amen.
So with that, Mr. Kenyon, are you warmed up, sir?
Next committee.
All in favor?